Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us this morning for the session, Cybersecurity, Uncovering New Risks in the New Normal. My name is Mark Parr and I'm the Global CIO for HFW. HFW is a sector-focused global law firm with over 1,100 colleagues working across the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and Australasia. We take a progressive approach to our role in commercial business, and using the strapline entrepreneurial, creative, and collaborative, we very much consider technology as being a differentiator in the marketplace, and that cybersecurity is the golden thread that runs through the delivery of legal services across all sectors and regions. I began my journey into information technology and cybersecurity in the analog era in the late 80s through a British Army technical apprenticeship. That led through to a successful 27-year military career where I delivered command and control networks, technology solutions in support of operations globally. Post my military career, I went on to join KPMG, initially undertaking a people operations role, delivering cybersecurity consultancy to financial services, before being appointed as the CISO and head of information assurance, where I looked after 17,000 staff across 27 sites, delivering professional services globally. So whilst in my current role, I very much have a focus on the enablement of technology to support legal services, I'm acutely aware of the security golden thread running through all aspects of that delivery. I'm delighted to have joining me Oz Alash. Oz is the CEO and founder of CyberSafe. CyberSafe is an innovative British cybersecurity and data analytics company. Not only is CyberSafe an award-winning cloud-based platform that goes beyond tick box security training, but the aspect that has impressed me most with the tool is that it's the innovative technology that fuses psychology and behavioral sciences with artificial intelligence and data science, so very much aligned to the conversation we're going to have today. Rather impressive, Oz is a former UK Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel. He was awarded an MBE in 2010. He's an associate fellow of the Royal United Services Institute. Many of you will know is the world's oldest and the UK's leading defence and security think tank. But also we've seen CyberSafe being awarded Digital SME in 2019 and very many other awards. Oz's focus is on making society more secure by helping organisations effectively address the human aspects of cybersecurity. He has extensive experience and understanding in the areas of intelligence insight, complex human networks, and the human component of cybersecurity. He's also passionate about reducing societal threats to stability and security by making the most of opportunities presented through advancements in technology. Oz, it's great to have you along. Thank you for joining me.
Mark, thank you for having me along. Always a little cringeworthy listening to people talk about you in that way and in such a polite way. But it's brilliant to be with you today talking about these issues.
No, wonderful, and it's not hyperbole. I think, Oz, one of the things we'll draw from this is not only your understanding of the cybersecurity threat and what that means from the technology standpoint, but very much, I think, the human aspect of that, the biggest part, the biggest risk, or the biggest factor to consider, and your insight and your leadership skills, I think, very much will help this conversation. So I think we'll kick this off with looking at that human factor and understanding, or really taking into view what's changed since we've come into this pandemic, and now as we push through to what that looks like next. I think for me, as I said, 11,000 staff in my current organization. We're around the world and actually having slightly different views of how the pandemic affected them, how they started to work differently. But very much, I think, and it was drawn out in the PwC report in 2019, cybersecurity in the legal sector particularly is probably a step or two off the pace in what you would have seen elsewhere. And very much playing catch up now to ensure that human element is considered as much as the technical element. What I'm seeing very much is a desire by people to understand their part to play, and a little bit of now, how do I make that ground between what was conventional sort of security awareness training done once a year into an inculcated sort of continuing drumbeat of stuff that helps them. Be good to get your view, what you've seen sort of generally from this.
Yeah, it's been a truly fascinating time, Mark, if you consider that it wasn't that long ago, look back to the beginning of the year, when not very many of us around the world could see what has just happened over the last 5 or 6 months occurring. Clearly, some parts of the world had already woken up to, certainly in Asia, the fact that there was a global issue, or the potential for a global issue, certainly a more localized issue. But the reality is not many people, even with the best foresight, had any real understanding of the complete change that will occur for so many people. But of course, what's more important, I guess, with the context of this conversation is it's not just about how we work or where we work or how we live and where we live, but of course, more importantly, I guess, maybe our understanding and acceptance of the role that we as individuals play in everything that we do. So as nations have kind of curbed the impact that this pandemic has had on our lives, we've also had to think about how we engage with technology and carry on with our lives. And the reason that's important, the reason I give that backdrop, is because if you think about security awareness, many people, and I'm the first person at the front of this queue, will admit that actually telling people what to do, training them, and expecting training to change everything, and by everything I mean change their behavior, change their attitude, reduce the risk for the organization, it's actually quite a strange thing to rely on. It's if it was that simple, if you could literally train your way out of this risk, then you would just hire really quite effective teachers, or indeed people who are very, very good at learning everything. And the truth is, that's just not the way we work as human beings. And some of the threats that we have seen, some of the risks that we face as organizations, have increased in number, but haven't really changed very much in type. And the reason that's important is because I think that the security community, and those of us focused on human cyber risk, have increasingly woken to the fact that we need to find a better way to help people do what people do, which of course is be productive, make mistakes that aren't fatal and don't destroy our organization, because actually we've thought through being resilient. And I think that's one of the things that is most exciting right now about what's happening in the security awareness space. Security awareness is not just about training people. If it was, then you would just get better trainers. And better trainers and instructors and teachers is not the complete solution. It's not to say that training isn't important. There's more to it. And Mark, I think that's, your 11,500 people, really good example of, such a multitude, different types of people. You must see some of this, I suspect.
Yeah, it sort of makes me think about that point absolutely, Oz, around what's in it for me. It's that aspect of the training. And what I've really noticed is an improvement in the competency of people to use technology. So I think for me, it's key that as well as providing the technology that enables them, I've also got to give them the tools to be secure in whatever environment they're in. And I think where I've really seen it be effective, if I can put it into their home, if I can help them understand the risks that they face at home and when they're using their internet at home, and whether their children are using their internet, and then start to build those behaviors where they think in that manner in their personal space, that when they then bring that professionally, they'll have the same thought process. But it's been really interesting to see the reaction to sort of how people have, when they first went to working in a new space, but thinking you could rely on your old working practices, and printing is a key thing for me. And the idea that you're going to be sat at home and you're going to be printing, but not really thinking about the so what of your printing at home, because you wouldn't have done that before, into all of a sudden, if you're printing work documents at home, how do you secure them? And it feels like a really small point, but as you all know, that's one of the key tenets to sort of security, is thinking about information in whatever format it's in. So that's been really interesting to sort of see that model change and that paradigm shift as people start to go, actually, I've got to be more conscious about what I'm doing here. Shutting down my machine at night, securing my laptop, or making sure that my screen isn't visible through the window. Versus, because you will have a different view of the security of your home than you would have of the office.
Yes.
And that's been really interesting. Are you seeing the same with sort of clients that you're talking to?
We are, and one of the things that I think is and will only increase really over time, is as we wake up and realize that actually some of the things we took for granted in our previous environments, actually we can no longer take for granted. And you know, we've now been working in this new way of working, and by that I mean with fewer people in the office all of the time for some time now. And even as things change, and I know there's two polarized views that seem to be the loudest, everyone's going to go back to work and no one's ever going to go back to the office. I think the reality is we'll see something much more flexibly in the middle, where people are working more flexibly. But we were going to have to evolve the way that security or people interacted with technology in order to be secure anyway. And there are so many things I think that sometimes as leaders, so I'm not now just talking about the security community, I'm talking about business leaders, so many things that I think sometimes we just assume our people can't do. We just assume it's too difficult for them, or indeed they won't want to do it. And the truth is, most of us don't want to do anything unless it's really beneficial. So we need to help people understand how it's beneficial. And you've just given a couple of good examples there, Mark, where you've talked about it being relevant in the home as well as in the workplace. That's a really good example of how making things relevant to people and helping them see how I can be productive in my home environment and be secure at the same time. It's a shared responsibility. And we're definitely seeing that shared responsibility being taken seriously by a number of organizations. But it's also okay to accept that we don't really know where to start. So to really, you know, for many organizations, it was just, you know, it's quite a lot to just get people not to leave stuff on the printer in the office, let alone not print it and leave it lying around at the house. So it's a journey for many organizations, and we're seeing organizations go on that journey.
You mentioned leadership there, Oz, and you know, I'm acutely aware not only of your former background in defence, but equally now as the CEO of a really, you know, a really burgeoning, blossoming organisation with CyberSafe. But so you've got that. Yes, you're a technical organisation, but you know, you are the leader of that, and the same for me as the sort of CIO. Yes, I'm the head of technology. I think one of the biggest challenges I've faced over this is how I continue to provide that leadership and flex my leadership style to suit the organization working in this new way. But also how I ensure that the delivery of technology, and for HFW, the delivery of technology is not just about the technology that enables the organization, but very much also how technology is the differentiator for us in delivering legal services in the marketplace. So I have two sort of strands to my role. The biggest challenge I think I've faced has been, as I said, that providing leadership in the right way to suit my people and to suit what my clients' expectations are. From your perspective, you know, how are you finding that around what what your organization, what CyberSafe will want from us, and also what your clients will want?
I do believe, and you know, Mark, you share a background in this sense. You know, our previous organisations in the form of defence, and actually, of course, this is the case all around the world, really focused on leadership. So having watched it now, in my particular case, for 17 years, been part of an organisation that really placed leadership and believing that leaders create leaders. You know, it's something that happens at every level rather than something that happens at a particular management level or a particular level of responsibility. Leaders create leaders. And I think that one of the things that I've most enjoyed during this period is the watching not just myself, but also those that work within our organization understand that our job as leaders is to create the conditions for those people we have the privilege of leading to succeed. And of course, one of the ways we create those conditions is by using the tools at our disposal. And in this particular case, we're talking about technology here. Your HFW, you are using technology not just to deliver your business, but actually to be a better business. We're the same at CyberSafe. We're a technology company, a data analytics company. We build software, but yet we've had to have a really good look, and it's a constant look to ensure that are we making the best use of the tools that are available in order to constantly be better, be more efficient? Can we do more with less? Can we do it cheaper? Can we do it more effectively or faster? And that's a constant consideration as a leader. But you do need support. If you think about it, as leaders, none of us really know everything, of course. And our teams generally have most of the answers that we would need to be able to harness. Providing the tools for them to be able to share those ideas has been something that I think is really it's not a legacy from this period, because it was happening beforehand, but really an acceleration. Many of our organizations are doing things that we probably thought would take us several years to be able to do well, yet they've happened overnight. That is leadership, creating the conditions for those people that we lead to succeed.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot around trust here, isn't there? And trusting in your people to do the right thing.
Yes.
So I think something I was really keen to establish at HFW was our mission. And I know you would have done the same with CyberSafe. It's very much what are we aiming to do? It's not good enough, is it, to say we've got a 5-year strategy and it only points out, I took over a role in 2019, so it points out to 2024 and you go, that's our strategy. That's because you're moving along that path constantly. And I use an analogy. My team are probably sick of hearing me say it, but I talk about we're fixing the plane whilst we fly the plane and we're serving cocktails to the passengers. Because there's so many different strands running through all of this. And by allowing the team to sort of stretch their legs in the bits where they feel that they can,
yes,
but also setting the conditions to keep them bound to deliver what the end goal is. And I always talk about that, the so what. And it's back to the military days of talking about the 7 questions. For those of you who aren't aware, the 7 questions was a planning tool that the British military and the US military used to great effect to plan sort of missions. But I use the so what, the continuing, just drill down to the point where you can't answer any more so whats.
yes.
And then that's the sort of, there's your specified mission, but there's the implied tasks that sit all around that. I think one of the things I've really enjoyed seeing at my team at HFW, and I did the same at KPMG, was sort of relying on that trust and leadership at all levels, and knowing that you've got the right people in place to support you on that. And I talk a lot to my team and my senior leadership team around high performance culture and that 1% improvement every day.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's been wonderful to see how they've come on that journey with me, and how we're now starting to sort of all be aligned in knowing where we want to get to, but equally trusting and being confident that they can challenge me, because I'm acutely aware I don't know all the answers, but they can challenge my assumptions or my determinations, and that will help us improve and continually improve. It's been a really interesting, certainly as we've gone into this, to see that change.
And have you found that, I guess if you think about where you started in 2019, and of course you couldn't have foreseen what was going to happen, but the groundwork, the conversations, maybe even some of the things that you put in place at the beginning have really borne fruit throughout this period. And if so, how's that happened?
Yeah, it was really apparent actually, and I think I worked really hard to sort of focus on the team and the people first, rather than trying to put my arms around the technology estate. I felt that was the bit where I was going to see the fruit born much quicker. And therefore, when we went into this, when we sort of rumbled into the new year, excited for what 2020 was going to give us, and this journey that we were going to go on, and then how very quickly we had to change that. I was really impressed to see that my middle management team felt confident and comfortable enough to push on. And we've delivered a couple of technology programs that were 18 months away previously. So we dropped Microsoft Teams into the organization. Good example. We did that entirely remotely. We trained everybody entirely remotely. We went through the change management process entirely remotely. And we were able to do that successfully because everybody felt empowered and everybody knew that they had the trust, and we all knew what we were trying to achieve. So I think I've been really clear, and as I say, as cheesy as it may be, developing that mission statement, having a common mission, having a value that we work to, starting to build some leadership principles and adhering to those, and asking people to buy into that concept, actually meant when we were now in this much different situation, that they felt much more comfortable. And I talk a lot about the new contract that I've established with my team. The contract is that we now share our personal spaces with each other. You know, my whole team see my daughter's photographs behind me. You know, that they get to see our home. We get to see children coming into shop. So we're sharing a different contract now, and I think much of that has been born out of very much at the start that building that relationship and thinking about the people at the very start. And I think when I look across technology and I look across the cybersecurity aspects that I'll be thinking about as CIO, it is very much about the people first. They're the people that are delivering. That's what our business sells is. It's the intellectual property developed by people. And therefore, I've got to give them every tool available to be as productive as they can be, to be as efficient as they can be, to do it as securely as they can be. And as I say, it's all people. It's all the human bit.
And the reason I think that this is worth dwelling on in any environment, let alone a kind of conference like this, is, you know, quite often it's easy for people to focus on technology for the sake of technology. We focus on some of the amazing things that technology is going to enable us to do, and some of the amazing developments and advancements in technology. Or we focus on, I guess, what people do, and we kind of separate it from the support and the assistance that they have, because it's about what people do rather than how people are enabled. But actually, I think if most of us are honest as business leaders and we think about what we're trying to achieve, and we think about the fundamental output that we have, in most cases, most organizations, it's really the blending of the two, man and machine, that really deliver extraordinary things, increasingly, constantly improving extraordinary things. And that's quite exciting. Whether you look at it one end, you know, 2020 hasn't just been a year for the pandemic, 2020 has been a year for all sorts of highlighting of issues, social injustices, climate change, access to education, access to clean water. You know, there's so many challenges we can think about that ultimately need to be addressed, and indeed people are turning their attention to addressing. And then, of course, we've got the day-to-day, what we do as businesses, whether that's an international law firm like yours, a cybersecurity data analytics company like mine, or whoever else is listening and think about it. People and machines together, you can't get away from not just the potential, but really the need to get to grips. And so, you know, you talked about trust, and there's so many different ways to think about it. There's the trust of our people, trusting people to get on and do what they need to do. Our whole world has just relied on it significantly, and most organizations have really benefited from that, a trust they probably wouldn't have ever shown before. There's also then the trust of, how can I trust this person to be the person they say they are? You know, how do I ensure that my business, I've just gone to all of this trouble to reconfigure ourselves so we can operate remotely, only to then be undermined because we've done the wrong thing, somebody has made a mistake, or I haven't made the decisions I need to make, and now I can't operate because of a cyber incident. You know, there's different levels of trust, and I think that all of this gets wrapped up in this kind of conversation we're having right now, which is, what does it mean to operate in the new reality?
I think something that's always struck me, and certainly when I was CISO at KPMG, was the value in the training we were delivering, or the awareness that we were undertaking. And I know we've discussed this, and it's something that I think I've always found really fascinating about CyberSafe and your blend of the data and the analytics of that data with the science that backs it up. And the people aspect, and I'm you know, when I listen to your doctors talk about the human aspect of this, it's a thing that's always really piqued my interest, because it's not just about the ones and zeros, it's not just about the latest firewall. Certainly when I was at KPMG, I was always minded that we talked about what the regulator expected from us in the way of, it's an annual certification of training, or we talk about what clients ask. But where I've always been most frustrated is what do the metrics really mean? You know, if I do annual training, how do I measure that success? Or this idea that I'm going to run a phishing campaign, for instance, and it might only be, I'm at a click rate of 67% and I want to reduce it to 45. Does that really mean anything? Are they useful? Or are they just hollow metrics that simply just sort of tick box? And I know this is something that you will be really passionate to consider, but you know, from your perspective, you know, where do you think the value of metrics sits for a technology leader?
I think that metrics, measurements, indicators, insights, these are they're absolutely critical if we're serious about making better decisions. If you think about it from a cyber resilience perspective, when it comes to security, ultimately all of these measurements are about helping us understand, are we better off today than we were yesterday? Am I carrying less risk now than I was before I did that thing? Should I be concerned about something that may or may not happen? And if so, how concerned? You wouldn't be able to answer those questions without metrics or measurements of some description. But the challenge when it comes to the human aspect is that metrics quite often is a kind of blanket term. And we assume that all metrics are created equal. And the truth is there aren't. Some metrics are actually quite shallow. How many people attended my training is completely different to the question, how many people have actually changed their behavior on the basis of the training they just received. And how many people clicked on a phishing email when I simulated a phishing email is a completely different answer to how many people are likely to click on a phishing email if it comes from an external thing. It's not something I've created, not something that was really easy to do. So I think there's a level of granularity behind the metrics or underneath the metrics that often gets glossed over. And that's fine if you are completely sure that you had nothing to worry about. Cyber risk was not important to you. If it is important to you, you have managed to somehow design out the human. But most organizations don't fall into either of those categories. Cyber risk is important to us as organizations, and we haven't managed to design out the human being, and nor would we seek to. In fact, as we discussed earlier on, Mark, the human being, our people, are the best bits of our organization. Why would we want to design them out? So actually metrics are important, and therefore that then leads you to a question that, and the way we look at it at CyberSafe is, what is it we're trying to achieve? We want to reduce risk. We want to reduce risk as it relates to people. That's really about how people behave. What do people do? Not what do they answer, not where do they go, not what do they watch, what do they do when presented with a cyber challenge, when presented with a question, when presented with a decision. And it's only when you look at what people do, then it leads you to the next question and say, what? Well, actually, what do I want them to do? Which behaviors are actually important to me? If everybody attends their training, but nobody has a good password or passphrase, is that good news or bad news? If everybody visited or watched or looked at that poster that was stuck up by the photocopying machine or the screensaver that I sent out, but not a single person set their phone to auto lock, such that every time anybody lost a device, all of my company data went with it, is that a good thing? So we have to delve down into the detail of the metrics. And so that's one of the things that we do at CyberSafe. We help organizations measure, understand, and reduce human cyber risk. But the reason we do it the way that we do it is because we believe that people are important, they are paramount, and there's more we can do as organizations to make it really easy for people to do the right thing. And more importantly, we need the data to see whether what we're doing is working. So give us the metrics, and that's what we do. Our software platform provides people the metrics to do that.
I think certainly when I was in the CISO role, it was something, of the two biggest firm-wide risks, cyber was one at the very, very top. And then as I broke that down, it was very much about the people and how the people interacted and all the scenarios that all had the people element before I went anywhere near the technology element. And that was really, that's really telling, isn't it? I know there, and certainly now in my new role, the focus for us is making sure that people aren't scared of using the technology and changing the language a little, I think, because you've talked about people doing what do you want them to do? You want them to do the right thing. And yes, you might have told them to do that, how to do that in March, but you want them to still feel comfortable that even if they don't do the right thing, that mistakes happen.
And they can help. Just because a mistake hasn't happened, it's not the end of the world. They can still help by, actually, I now know who to inform. I've made a mistake. I know who to inform. Actually, somebody in Mark's somewhere that either reports to Mark or reports to somebody that reports to Mark is going to help me now. this idea that actually it's a two-way thing rather than you're on your own. Why did you do that? What, you idiot.
Absolutely. And that's really important, is it, knowing that we can then help unpick the mistake, and that people will support you, and you're not going to be disciplined, you're not going to be told off, you're not going to find yourself being blamed for whatever. That's been, that's really interesting to see that sort of change. I know we've talked about this before, but certainly when I was at KPMG, the focus there was, how do I help people identify where the risks sit as well? Because I think this is key. It's not good enough just to have a risk management framework. I think people need to understand that they can identify some of those risks, and they can tell us when they identify those risks, because we won't have captured them all. And I remember, as we talked about how we might change that drumbeat of continual sort of awareness and continual training, and just I liken it to that golden thread, but I think that's the right analogy. That golden thread that runs through everything that is security. It's just getting people used to behaving in a certain way, because then it becomes sort of muscle memory. You then start to think of that, and then start to draw that into every other aspect of what you're doing. Whether it's as simple as removing your ID pass when you walk out of the building, or putting away a bit of paper when you're no longer, or destroying it, whatever. Just these. If you just keep reminding them of these little steps, then actually it grows into that sort of bigger. My children mock me for my desire to get them to update their Mac devices every time there's a new iOS drop or whatever. But actually, as my son now builds his burgeoning technology career, he can see the merit of it. He understands now, as he's doing his network and analyst work. He starts to go, I see why Dad taught like that, and it's starting to build into the way he thinks. And I think that was always my desire at KPMG, and certainly what I'm trying to do now at HFW, is drive that. Just those little, I talk about the 1% improvement. It's just those little improvements every day. You get people to think differently and realize their part to play. I think is really invaluable.
Yeah, and I think sometimes and actually, interestingly, the security community is sometimes quite bad for this, and also as leaders, we're bad for this. We think in absolutes. So we think about perfection, and therefore let that get in the way. If everybody can't do everything right all the time, then it's obviously not worth doing. We need to do something else, which is, of course, when it comes to security, is just not the way things work. And so that's why I think your concept of excellence rather than perfection is important. Getting better every day rather than going from 0 to 1 and everything being okay, which of course there's no absolute when it comes to security. And I think that's something that is not just a healthy way to be, but is actually a much more realistic way. Everyone can achieve that then. We can create things for our people to do that improve not just their lives, but the whole organization's lives all the time. And those things then become muscle memory. But in some cases, they actually may just always need help with it. But we can also design in the help. And that's the other thing I think that's also quite exciting, is this idea that actually it's a two-way piece. Let's design in the help. If I need to get from A to B, and this is one of the changes we've seen with security awareness, if I need to get from A to B, I look at my phone and I look at a map. I don't expect the map to teach me how to use a map. I expect the map to tell me how to get from A to B. I literally speak and hear it. I don't even want to look down. I want to hear. Turn left, turn right. And so when it comes to security awareness, we spend a lot of time training people on what to do in the event that something happens. It's kind of hope, as opposed to giving them assistance and support. Rather than telling them what to do today and hoping they remember it in several months' time, why not actually, yes, maybe educate them, but also give them the help when they need it at the point that they need it. And of course, that's one of the ways that technology enables us to do that much more intelligently.
So something that's really interests me, Oz, and while I've got you, perhaps get you to drill into a little bit, is the science bit behind this. And it's something that I'm trying to sort of think more about, but the actual the psychology of the person and that bit. And I know certainly it's a big part of your tool and what you're thinking about. What would be, for the audience, what would be the sort of two or three things that they should be thinking about their people and about the way that people operate that can help them start to set some of these conditions?
So I think one of the things that we at CyberSafe, we pride ourselves on this, but actually we have no authorship of many of this. The academic community that has been looking at why people behave the way that they do in certain circumstances is so rich. There's so much research, and actually it's used to such great effect with so many other things, other fields, whether that's from advertising, communications, safety even. But yet actually we've been very slow with the uptake when it comes to security, and specifically cybersecurity, or security as it relates to the use of technology. But actually at CyberSafe, we know that that's where you need to start. If you're serious about human cyber risk, you need to start with the decisions that we make as people and why we make them. And so with that in mind, actually for organizations, anyone listening, the thing for us to really consider is start with the question why. If there is a behavior or there is a particular practice that is not happening that you think should be happening, or is happening that you don't think should be happening, the question is why. Sometimes the answer is because people don't know what to do. Sometimes, actually quite often, it's because it's easier to do it another way, or people feel it's more important to do it another way. And it's that idea of relative importance or prioritization that we often neglect. The psychology of most of us as human beings, and noting that there is no real such thing as a neurotypical, but the psychology of most of us as human beings mean that actually we're hardwired to a degree to do the thing that we think is most appropriate. And especially when you then add on to the fact that most of our people are good people, they generally want the best for their organizations, but they also want to be productive. We create mental shortcuts, heuristics. And it's those heuristics that determine the decisions that we make every day. Lots and lots of small ones which enable us to get through lives. When it comes to security, it's no different. So actually as security professionals, or indeed as leaders who are trying to grow secure companies or be more secure, we need to take those things into account. And quite often we think of security and we tell people to do things that are just unreasonable. Change your password every 90 days, but don't write it down. What? Or, I don't know, lock your screen when you leave your desk, but we don't set auto locks on, which we know would time out after a period of time if we wanted them to. It's just, we can just be more realistic, and all that realism that I'm describing really is taking into account human beings and the psychology of human beings and why we do what we do. So I think this is an extraordinary field. It's a really exciting field. There was a time when people thought of security awareness and they thought of training people, PowerPoint presentations, standing in front of somebody and telling them what to do and what not to do, and why maybe even. But the reality is it's 2020. The world has moved on significantly.
I think it's a really interesting point around the shift as leaders. It's a shift in our focus from, we're not looking for the 1% who are deliberately trying to do something malicious. We're looking at the 99.9% that actually want to do the right thing, and therefore make it easier for them to do the right thing. Make sure that the technology supports them, rather than making it difficult and making, and expecting them to do much more what technology can do. So it's really interesting point around the sort of lock screen idea, isn't it? You leave your desk. Let's take passwords, because it's something I'm really focusing on at the moment at HFW, is to move away. I think this 90-day reset idea is bonkers. So go to a passphrase, teach people how to create passphrases, and give them much longer to be comfortable with it. And show them how to do that. But equally, if I'm always minded, and I use this with my team a lot. If I want to do my banking, I can do it through my iPhone simply by looking at the device. And I'm comfortable that holds all the information for my bank. And yet, to get you to log in to work, why don't I use the biometrics? Why don't I use facial recognition? Or, this technology available and is really good. And we can use it to much better effect. I think it's a really interesting sort of paradigm shift, isn't it? To go away from, you're going to have a 9-character password, you change it every 90 days, don't write it down, commit it, have a different one for everything. So we're also making it more difficult for you to do the right thing, rather than
here's a password manager. Use a password manager. Please stop using terrible passwords. use a password manager.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I think we often see, and you must see this as well, is the kind of butting up against what I think most leaders and executives want, which is genuine pragmatic progress. Most people are very familiar with the biometric technology that you've described. So not only are they familiar with it, we love it. We use it to great effect for our day-to-day lives. But then actually when we try to bring those things into organizations, which of course will vary depending on the size of the organization, the inertia because of the friction that has to be broken through in order to make changes, very necessarily, when you consider that, of course, small changes sometimes can lead to quite big outcomes. So almost the good intention ends up fizzling out. Finding a way to work around that, to not be so foolish that we throw everything out and recklessly do away with all of the good things in place, but we don't stay stuck in our way because that's the way that we've always done it. Here we use passwords, and those passwords have to be changed every 90 days because that's the way we've always done it. Even though all of the research suggests that making people do that makes them write it down. It's kind of how you find a way, and I'd be interested to know how you've managed to kind of balance that, because you've worked in organizations that are tens of thousands of people, and also organizations holding the keys to the kingdom as far as information is concerned, but yet want to embrace technology. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's really challenging. I think that the theme that I will always maintain to sort of run, will be in the back of my mind, will always be the enablement bit, and how can they use the tool to best effect. But it has been really, I saw a step change from when I was in the professional services world before I went to legal. In legal, it's still, they're still very paper-based, paper-heavy, and they're starting to wrestle with the concept now of changing and using technology to think about, e-signatures and e-bundles to go to courts, and courts having to adopt new technology to support, what is a very old industry. So the change, there's definitely a desire to change, but I think it's the pace at which we deliver it will be challenging, because, as I say, fixing the plane and flying the plane, whilst you're trying to implement these new technologies, you've got to deliver BAU. But also, I think it's the willingness to accept the change, and that's the bit probably where I feel some of the friction the most is I don't want technology to be the tail wagging the business dog, and ensuring that certainly a lot of the feedback I had when I arrived into HFW was technology due to us. And that's the wrong focus. For me, it should be about what's the business need, what are we trying to achieve, what do the people selling the work need, and then how do I support that? And very much, as I said at the start, when I think about the two strands to my role, it's as the technology deliverer for the business. That's one aspect where I've got to make sure I'm giving them the right tools to support that, and very much sort of persona-based, thinking that different people will do different roles and therefore have a different technology need. It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all arena, versus our different client base across all the different sectors, and what do they need and what are they expecting. And we talked about data. Data is important to the future of HFW as it was when we were at KPMG. It's very much, if I have the right understanding of my data, then how can I use that data to better position us to meet the needs of our clients? But also using that data so that it's meaningful, so I can understand how the technology can be used and how we can continue on that sort of roadmap of technology as an enablement that allows us to grow and move in the marketplace and be a differentiator. And it's all then, with a wonderful backdrop that is budget management and change management and people management and all those other wonderful bits that make it a really rich role. But particularly at the moment, when you think I'm spending a lot of my time preserving my budget to ensure that I can continue to provide those technology developments, but also at the same time of just being slightly cautious or planning out budgetary spend in a different way than I perhaps would have done 6 months ago. And it's been really really challenging and really good to see how the business has shifted that focus and actually moving some of my sort of technology aspects around. So, our move to the cloud is a really good example. That was 18 months, 2 years away. It's now likely to happen in the next 2 to 3. And I've shifted some other elements. So I'm moving stuff.
Yes.
And having that sort of agility is I think, was vital to us remaining successful.
I think it's so much so, because the truth is, one, we're reconfiguring now for what we can see and what we expect, and with the benefits of good planning. But that constant change, as the marketplace changes, as the needs of the market change, and of course as the technology available to us changes. And you said something there which I think is so important as well. This, the realization that one size does not fit all. In fact, if you're trying to apply one size either to all of your people, or indeed one style or one particular stack to every challenge that you have, inevitably there are going to be trade-offs, and therefore you have to then determine where those trade-offs are worth it and where those trade-offs are not. And I think that this is one of the reasons why I think that technology, as it's applied to support the output of an organization, is such an interesting space to be, because the fact of the matter is that we don't take a one-size-fits-all approach with our customers. Why would we take a one-size-fits-all approach with our own organization? Yet how do we do that in a way that means we don't end up with such a patch quilt that it's a nightmare to manage, and actually then we're locked into everything forever? All of these challenges, I think, are really necessary business challenges. But as leaders, we should be comfortable with those conversations. We should be comfortable asking questions that probably feel a little bit silly as leaders, such as, where cybersecurity is important, what are we doing here about our people? Or, gosh, I understand that we want to be able to use the latest technology. How does that work with everything else that we're using? Those kinds of questions, I think, are absolutely increasingly being asked at the very senior levels in all organizations, and actually they should be asked at the junior levels as well. How does this new piece of technology that I've been asked to use actually help me, and how do I ensure that I and my team stay secure? We don't put the business at any more risk on the basis of what we're about to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it? It's the people at the start of their career, how they feel that they're part of this story, isn't it? And I certainly look across my technology team, and we're using the SFIA, the Skills Framework for the Information Age, as our framework now for building out our technology offering, and thinking about how I qualify my people and meet the digital skills gap and everything else. That's wonderful for technologists, because there's a very clear information security line and lots of wonderful sort of descriptors that take them through that journey. But what about the business user? What about those people who are delivering at various, whatever their role is, whether it's a PA, a legal assistant, an associate, where's their framework and descriptor? So actually making sure that they're getting that same exposure and understanding and view of where their, what their part is to play, and where they sit within the organization and what their part to play is. Leads us very nicely into that sort of final point, is what's next. And I know this is something you'll be thinking about a lot. For me, the challenge now is about engaging and ensuring that people feel that they are part of that, and that they understand that it's not just being told or being talked to or being presented. And you sort of alluded to it at the start, but your security awareness and training, we have to continue that. There has to be, it has its part to play. But I think from an overall education bit, we have to just think a bit differently, and we have to talk about how we help people understand and help people when they don't know what to do, and if they don't know what the right thing is, where do they go next?
Right, that's right. And I think that the opportunity that we have, and the direct answer to the question, what's next, the opportunity that we have now is to shift our approach, so that we don't only acknowledge that people are important. Everybody kind of accepts that the people component, people process technology is important, but we then actually live that. So we move from telling people solely what to do to supporting and helping them providing assistance. We talk at Cybersecurity of the borderless world, which most people, when they think about borderless, they think about a lack of walls or people being away from the office, but it's far more than that. Borderless is about a mindset. It's about the way in which we want our teams to operate, to not be constrained by the things that they can see in front of them, but to imagine the future for whatever it is that they're doing. So in your particular case, what does the future of delivering legal support look like? It's almost unfathomable, or unfathomable, whichever the word is, for that to not include making the most of technology. So how do we do this? How do we get people to be bold, innovative, make the use of technology, and do so without introducing risk to our organization, which means actually not introducing risk to themselves. When it comes to security awareness, that's the same logic that we're applying. How do we connect with people and change their behavior, but provide the organization the data and the metrics so they can see whether what they want to be happening is working? That's where the opportunity, I think, exists right now. Science and data science help us significantly. So does common sense. Let's stop doing stuff for the sake of doing it, and let's do it to benefit us and our people. That's really what security awareness is evolving into.
Yeah, certainly for me, the HFW strapline, entrepreneurial, creative, and collaborative, that really rings true to what you just said there, and very much, especially the collaborative and creative bit. The bit where I really like that phrase borderless, because actually that's how as I talked about that new contract we've entered into, it doesn't matter now that we don't have to be bound by conventional, I'm sitting in the office in London and I'm working to the office in Hong Kong. It is, people will work in a way that best suits them to deliver the best output.
Yes.
And certainly I know that we've had this discussion previously where we've talked about people working in a way that suits them, less about in the way that suited the old conventional 9-to-5 type activities.
Yes.
Or people being measured on output versus hours done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the biggest thing that I want to be able to achieve in my tenure at HFW, for however long that may be, is the collaborative bit. And to be able to ensure that the 1,100 staff that we have, wherever they are in the world, are able to work in their industry groups or across sectors with each other in a way that they haven't done before, and feel confident and comfortable and competent to be able to do that. And that takes, and this is the bit I think that I really enjoy the most about being in my position, is being able to be creative in thinking about how that looks. And to have a new mindset about, it's not just about replacing old box in a data center for a new box in a data center. It's not good enough just to go, there's a new piece of tin that's connected to a bit of wire and that's what gives us that. It's about thinking creatively now for solutions that are best fit for looking up and out. That where do we, it's the Buzz Lightyear moment, isn't it? To infinity and beyond, and thinking in a way that is bright and sharp and creative and entrepreneurial. So being bold, to use your phrase, very much, I think, for me as a technology leader, is where my mind is focused now. And I think that's a really exciting place. And I'm fortunate enough, having taken on my role, having been a CISO, that I have that really sort of firm cybersecurity sort of foundation that means everything I build off that will have that underpinning it. And I think that puts me in a really strong position, thankfully.
I can imagine that must be just a huge benefit to an organization who's thinking about how they do what they do now, but going forward into the future. And I can see huge merit in having a CIO who really does understand the importance, not just of how everything works, but how we do it in a way that means that we don't just not become insecure, but actually we make security an advantage, a benefit. Actually, when people know us, they trust us because of the way that we do our business.
Absolutely.
And I think that's huge. And we're seeing it across, and I see it across the sectors. We work with financial services, we work with legal, we work with some industries at the moment who are really struggling because airlines, the hospitality, but yet they are still not willing to give up the progress that they've made as far as security is concerned, because they know it's so vital. Trust. If they're going to get people back again, they need to have them be able to trust and look after their data and their systems to be able to stay up and running. So I think this is an interesting time, and it's been great talking about these things today because as part of this conference, one of the things that I suspect we'll all be thinking later on is as we think through to the what next. The truth is we're all guessing a little bit, but one of the things we don't guess about, we don't need to guess about, is the importance of our people as part of all of this. So people and technology will be here, whatever the solution is going to look like.
Absolutely. Oz, we've gone on a little longer than planned, but thank you ever so much. It's an absolute pleasure as always. And whenever we get together, there's so much information that you have in your head that I just want to draw out from you. It's always really engaging. Thank you ever so much for taking the time. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you all very much for joining us and listening in, and have a great day.